Welcome back. We're back in the shed. We're back where you've seen a lot of training vlogs before. This is the first training vlog of looking at some of the gym work, some of the conditioning work before the jiu-jitsu competition. This is obviously myself and Gareth's first jiu-jitsu competition, and my gym work leading up to this has probably just 2 aims, maybe 3 aims. The first one is maintenance of some of the strength work and maintenance of the power work. At the moment, my strength is far and away above my level of conditioning and level of skill in jiu-jitsu, so it's very, very new to me. I certainly don't need to be maintaining a 200 kilo front squat or 230 kilo back squat. So today the strength work will be like pull-ups, some lighter deadlifts. I'll do some power work at the start, so just some box jumps onto the table here. And then the second part of the gym work is going to be maintaining some bit of muscle tissue. So I'm going to cut a small bit of weight for this. Just before Christmas I was around 101 kilos. Ideally being down at like 98 would be great for this competition. And as I'm cutting weight, as I'm going through that kind of process, I don't want to atrophy a load of muscle tissue. So the second part of the session is just supersets with some kind of semi-specific strength work. So there's GHD sit-ups in there, there's back extension rows, there's strict presses in there, there's dips, there's landmine rows, and there's just a hang. So that is the kind of muscle preservation or strength preservation piece. Then last thing is, this is a very time restricted session. We are right now at 21:55 and I want to go to bed soon, so everything is written out on time. Try and run a kind of timing clock as we're going through this, as you see the different pieces that are in the session, so you'll get an idea for kind of how quickly I'm moving between each piece. So put on a pair of shorts and we'll go.
So first exercise, box jumps. Ideally for box jump we like to be landing just as high as possible, so knees as close to locked out, just a small bit of passive bend in the knee, hips fully open. In this case, as you'll see, I banged my head off the light a few times, but in this case the roof in the shed is quite low, so it's just as easy to land slightly crouched over. But the main thing is center of mass is moving quite a lot, so the kind of, you could take like the head of your femur or the level of your belly button as being a rough approximation of your center of mass, and that's moving quite high. So on next to deadlifts. It must be said, like before we start any of this, that although this session took around 50 minutes roughly, and there's no warm-up included, the warm-up was around 20 minutes of moving around stuff in the shed and bringing plates up from the other garage. So my back is definitely warm. It's definitely warm enough to get into these kind of deadlifts, so there's nothing to be too concerned about there. This is 190. This is the first double at 190. I think there's 4 or 5 sets of 2 at 190. Nice and easy. It's been a long time since I deadlifted anything, but very, very basic. Ideally I'd like my knees to stay forward for a small bit longer on these deadlifts. These are kind of as much a clean style deadlift as anything else, just with the knees coming back out of the way in the first pull, but overall they're quite good. I'm quite happy with them. The kind of fatigue from the session earlier on that day is definitely present. Like, definitely my back, my abs, everything is kind of just a small bit weary, but overall at this point things feel great. This is probably the most challenging exercise that I do in the session. So it's like a fingertip pull up. It's just on the girder of the shed. You can barely get like the first joint and probably a third of the way down the second joint of your finger into that gap, and just doing pull up. So start with a few set of 5. So I think there's 3 or 4 sets of 5 and then some sets of 3 to finish off. But they are just kind of killer on your fingers for what I want, which is like pretty specific grip strength on holding on to someone's gi, like the uniform in jiu-jitsu. I think they'll be quite good, or I hope they'll be quite good. Some static hangs in at the end of the session, just holding on to like a piece of carpet, which are to build that same kind of specific grip strength or quasi-specific grip strength. This is the first of the supersets. So what's happening with the supersets, they're taking like 7.5 or 8 minutes each, or somewhere around that. Basically no rest in between. So in that time, I'm getting around 4 sets done of the superset itself, so just going straight from sit-ups into strict press, sit-ups into strict press. This is actually working a small bit, not only on kind of maintaining some of that muscle tissue and ensuring there's not too much atrophy, but it's also a bit of like local muscular endurance, just keeping it at a quite high intensity. So it's definitely not specific strength work, but it definitely helps with that kind of muscular endurance. The GHD is probably the least accessible. If you're training at home and you just had a barbell and plates, you can do pretty much everything that's in this session. So there's nothing too fancy. The GHD is probably something a lot of people won't have at home. To be honest, if you were to pin your feet underneath the back of your couch, or pin them in underneath something, or just even pin your toes into the wall or a skirting board on the wall, you'd get a lot of the same training effect that you'd get from a GHD sit-up. You just get a few extra degrees of motion, or range of motion extra at the end of your setup, but I don't think that's hugely important. This is the second superset. So these are one of my favorite exercises, back extension rows. So just holding yourself in that back extension position, then doing your row. Ideally with these, you'd be doing them with like 25s, or maybe a bit heavier. In this case, just because I want to keep moving in between, I'm already pretty tired. That's a 15 kilo plate. The deficit push-ups then are probably like one of the more specifically tailored pieces of our exercises in this session. So one of the things, like for framing, so basically getting your hand in between you and somebody else and pushing them away if someone is squeezing into you, that is probably one of the weaker areas of my strength. So just trying to get that extra range of motion in that kind of horizontal press. You could do the same thing with like a dumbbell press, or if you had a buffalo bar, you could certainly, or a cambered bar, you could certainly do the same thing on just a normal bench press, but these do pretty much the same job. I did get a comment on an Instagram post about the thirst angle for the deficit push-ups, so I'll have to watch that in future. So this is the last set, the last superset, and it's hangs for grip. I was going to like hang a gi over top, but I didn't particularly want to destroy mine. And then it's cheetah rows. So cheetah rows are definitely a very, very good exercise for anyone who's grappling, tackling, getting into any kind of contact. I'm just doing these with a landmine in this case because it's easy to set up. Don't have dumbbells at home. Just plenty movement, plenty body English, just to try and force that scapula to come back into position, hold that position for a while, and then kind of gradually leave it down on the way back in. And that's it. That's today's session. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed the training vlogs in general, and we'll be back again soon. Thanks.